So where was I? Oh yeah, the new Devil May Cry game.
So you must be the secret ingredient.
And who the hell are you?
My name, by the way, is Dante.
Nero, buddy, I'm sorry. I take back everything I said. I was wrong. Come back to me, please. We made a mistake. You're not that bad. You're not that bad.
Too late for regrets.
Oh boy, so here we are, the DmC reboot. I'm honestly at a bit of a loss here. This has to be one of the most baffling games I've ever played. Hey, you know the most iconic hack-and-slash franchise of all time? Yeah, the one with the campy story, carefree action, and lovable protagonist? How about we reboot it as a try-hard Orwellian wobfest starring one of the most insufferable, obnoxious douchebags you've ever laid eyes on? Now, you can judge this game on its own merits all you want, and believe me, I will be doing in a bit, but may I first ask why? Why this was done? Because DMC4 was a tad underwhelming? Hey, Earth to Capcom. Nobody thought DMC4 was a little subpar because we didn't enjoy the universe. People found it subpar because you didn't finish it. Anyway, in this game you play as Dante, who lives in a caravan where he takes strippers to have casual sex with. So yeah, before you ask, there isn't actually a Devil May Cry in DmC Devil May Cry. Only lame people run their own businesses. Cool people live like transient hobos. Dante is such an unrelenting asshole in this game. Now, I'm not against playing as douchebags in video games. Titles like No More Heroes and Ratchet & Clank 1 handle that stuff well. It's when I'm not just expected to think this talking skid mark is a cool guy I should sympathize with, but also that he is somehow an improvement on the Dante of the previous games where problems start arising.
Not in a million years.
Oh look, Hobo Dante said a naughty word. What a badass.
Fuck you! Fuck you!
Seriously, some of the stuff that falls out of this guy's mouth would make a primary school bully cringe in embarrassment.
Who invited you, fat ass?
Not to mention how weirdly he pronounces certain things.
We are brothers, after all.
The changes made to his backstory make little sense too. Oh, now instead of being the son of a demon and a human, he's the son of a demon and an angel. Because angels are in Devil May Cry now. At least we're told. I don't think I saw any in the actual game. So if this guy wasn't unrelatable enough already, he's also not even human anymore. He might as well be an alien for all we care. Okay, the Dante in the previous game was a cartoon character, but he worked perfectly as the protagonist that kind of action game needed. He was the carefree hero, the man unaffected by his dark past or troubles, capable of putting a stop to any evildoers in his path. When you played Devil May Cry and the difficulty was putting you on edge and you were on the verge of quitting, you remembered Dante. Would he give up? Would he stop in the face of peril? You can't let Dante down, because no matter what stands in his way, he fights till the end. Not for himself, but for his fellow humans. Because as part human himself, he has that humanity that separates him from his foes, that gives him the edge that leads him to victory. We can all see a bit of ourselves in Dante, in his sexy pecs, his chiseled jaw, grisly manly stuff. So yeah, new Dante's a cock, moving on. Great combat is what separates the likes of Devil May Cry from the rank and file, and what little enjoyment is derived from DMC's combat can basically be traced back to the mechanics of older games. Does this mean DMC has some pretty good mechanics compared to a lot of hack and slashes today? Well, yeah, on a surface level. You know, no quick time events, emphasis on constant movement and on-the-fly combos and aerial tricks. Problem is that compared to the last two Devil May Cry games, it feels like we all just took 5 steps back and then tumbled into a puddle. Let's just run through the controls, shall we? First of all, there is no longer a lock-on button. So how do you perform directional attacks like the launch move? You know, those things the whole Devil May Cry combat system revolves around. Well, now the launch is mapped to the circle button as its own dedicated move. Oh, so it's a style then. Styles in DMC. That was a good one. So okay, back up a bit. If there is no lock-on, how are dodges performed? Well, you see, dodge is now also a dedicated button mapped to R1. And also L1.
Oh, great.
Then how do we enter Devil Trigger? By clicking L3 and R3. Wow, I didn't know we were playing the God of Wars. Now, even when the Devil May Cry games were doing odd things, I always felt that there was an effort to move the core gameplay forward, to build on what was previously done. DMC just dilutes it down to its basic mechanics and tries to sell us off some fairly crunchy feeling attack animations. Combat has been simplified to such a degree that the learning curve is basically gone. Moves once reserved for players who took the time to learn the mechanics of the game are now handed out so easily that any motivation to play quickly disappears. I mean, staying in the air for long periods of time was considered a skilled and rewarding challenge in the previous games, and now it's so preposterously easy you wonder if the game is even working properly. And what does this remind you of? The game performs at 30 frames per second, which for a game about quick reactions and hectic combat is a handicap straight off the bat. DMC 4 came out 5 years ago, and the fact that it runs twice as fast borders on the ludicrous. The game now runs off the Unreal Engine, which compared to the previous engine, MT Framework, is a serious step down in this case. Being the Unreal Engine, the game takes an eternity to load, textures pop in constantly, and everything looks washed out and lifeless. Again, DMC 4 was made 5 years ago and still looks better. Aesthetically speaking, the game mostly takes place in an alternate realm called Limbo that constantly blooms intense orange and blue colors at you. Not only does this game look like a crappy movie cover, but the intensity of the colors actually started to cause my eyes to strain at times. Combine that with the wubtastic soundtrack, and I'll admit that I had to put the game down from time to time just to give my senses a rest. And your senses will need a rest after hearing this game's awful attempts at narrative. The writing doesn't always sound awful, but when it's awful, it's pretty awful.
I will rip open his chest with my bare hands and feast on his beating heart.
And when it's not awful, it's trying to drum up suspense with an unending cluster of pretentiousness.
To see if you were still sane, or if you could still call yourself human.
I mean, DMC 4 could be long-winded at times, but at least it never tried to pass itself off as some sort of societal study of a covert fascist regime. Even when the game is trying to explain simplistic stuff, such as Dante's backstory, it manages to make it less compelling than the older games. Dante's once mysterious past is basically completely explained away in the second chapter, where the once badass deified Sparta is revealed here to be a balding middle-aged man who decided to spend his time running away and hiding from the big bad mean Mundus instead of doing anything about him. Not that confronting Mundus would have been too hard anyway, considering how easy this game is. I played through on the highest available default difficulty, and the game didn't even come close to any of the normal difficulty levels prior games offered. Instead of introducing enemies with, say, interesting maneuvers to outsmart, the game instead cops out and throws a bunch of enemies at you that can only be attacked with certain weapons, limiting your options and turning the game into an utter grind later on, where most of the challenge just comes from acquiring the patience needed to take down the baddies with overly long health bars. Bosses are some of the worst offenders of all. In prior games, they served as some of the most entertaining, challenging parts, as they essentially behaved like normal enemies but with a truckload more moves, forcing the player to perform the skills they learned to the best of their ability. Here though, the bosses are designed in the most dull and cliched manner possible, simply requiring a certain criteria to be met until you're allowed to wail away at them with no skill required in the equation. And of course, what would a modern boss battle be unless it was sprinkled with countless cutscenes used to break game flow? So, any improvements? Well, platforming. It works now. It's bland, it's very simplistic, but I must say it's probably the thing I most enjoyed out of this game, just because it was a break from all the monotonous, dull combat. So what is DmC Devil May Cry then? It takes the combat system of a great hack-and-slash franchise, dumbs it down while replacing a once iconic universe with a melodramatic cesspool of pretentious, obnoxious characters. But hey, I guess you can rest somewhat at ease. This game isn't like other games I've talked about. DMC isn't considered in canon with the rest of the Devil May Cry universe, so Uncle Dante can stay untainted in our hearts for now. Of course, considering that the achievement for beating this game is called
Don't bet on it.
I can only assume we may never again see our crazy old friend.
Humans possess something that demons don't.